Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Majority Rules. I'm glad you're here. It is really now officially the presidential election season. The nominees have been chosen, and they are Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And the woman, Nikki Haley, who broke a lot of records, made history with her run, has had to bow out. It was a very tough road for her to hoe, but completely amazing in what she did. And I feel like she really needs to get more credit. And since this is Majority Rules, and a huge part of what we do on this show is sort of highlight the stories behind the stories and also just try to fill in the picture that we don't hear elsewhere in the news, I think you really have to give it to Nikki Haley for her history making run. No woman, no Republican woman in history has gotten as close to the presidency as she has. No Republican woman in history has won delegates, this many delegates. I think she got 96 delegates in her effort to become president of the United States. And before that, even no Republican woman ever has served both as a governor and as a member of the presidential cabinet. And never mind the fact that she's also a woman of color, which makes it extra extraordinary. You know, she didn't run a perfect race. Nobody ever does. She certainly made her share of mistakes, but she got better as she went along. And it was really remarkable to see. And the way in which, she deserves credit for having like dispatched these, 15 guys that were running, including guys like Vivek Ramaswamy, who was like the biggest bag of hot air. But she took them all out one by one and managed to stay in the race longer than any of them. She completely dismantled the narrative about Ron DeSantis being the heir apparent, the sort of next president Republican nominee in the waiting. And she spoke mostly pretty honestly about President Trump. Her impact is real, and I think it's lasting. And it's real and lasting not just because of the cracks, to quote Hillary Clinton, the cracks that she put in the glass ceiling, which she very much did, but also because she managed to criticize Trump in real and honest ways. I think many of us would say she didn't go far enough, that she didn't do it soon enough, but she was pretty fearless in speaking some truth. And it made a difference. It made a difference not just because she showed people how to do it, but also because she managed to win, and I think hold, very substantial portion of the Republican electorate, the primary electorate, somewhere between 20 and 30% of Republicans who voted for her in this primary, who have told press that they will not vote for Donald Trump. And she deserves credit for that, especially this Women's History Month. It's March. March 8th is International Women's Day. A good time to remember that the United States has never elected, of course, a female head of state. 59 other nations have. And our system makes it exceptionally hard for women to run and win the presidency. If we had a parliamentary democracy, Nancy Pelosi would have been president in 2007. But we don't. We have this wacky popular election / caucus / primary problem, which makes it very hard. But so applause for history making Nikki Haley, which I'm going to talk about a little bit with my next guest. But it is time. It is really the presidential season now. It feels different. We are now going to be following the election and the campaign between Trump and Biden for the next 8 months, but also the very, very important contests that are happening in state houses, that are happening for control of the Senate. Big news that Kristen Sinema is not running. So it is now Ruben Gallego and Carrie Lake in the Senate race in Arizona. It is a whole new world and a campaign unlike any we've ever seen before. So we're going to be looking at it, and we're going to be looking at, for sure, what's happening with women voters, how they're going to turn this election, as they have every election since 1980. So that's our goal with Majority Rules. It's really a perfect time to have my guest today, Maria Cardona, who is a commentator at CNN, who many of you, I'm sure, know from her amazing work there over many years. She's also a political consultant, Dem political consultant, and she has this awesome podcast that she's been doing for a long time with another friend of mine, Alice Stewart, who is her Republican counterpart, on her podcast, Hot Mics from Left to Right, where they explore a lot of issues sort of both sides of the aisle, which I love. So I'm excited to talk to her. And Maria, welcome to Majority Rules. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It is such a pleasure to be here with you, my friend.
So, it's funny because we don't get to talk all the time, but I feel like we talk regularly over Twitter. Like, I feel like I know the
Yeah,
inner workings. I know what's happening in your mind.
that's very true. And likewise, I retweet you, you retweet me. I love it.
So it's so interesting because I feel like, we knew this was coming. We
Mhm.
knew that Nikki Haley had a real long shot chance for so many reasons,
Yeah.
not just because she's running against an incumbent, but also this, cult-like incumbent who has
Mhm.
the kind of devoted following that would just never be swayed from supporting him. And yet, I don't know, there was something about her announcement of leaving the race that even I, as a Democrat, was sort of sad about. You sort of
Yeah.
feel for people when they leave, and she made so much history, which I feel like she's not been given credit for. So I just wonder, like, as you we'll talk about what's now, but I just wanted to get your take on her because it's really easy it's Women's History Month. Like, the
Yeah.
woman is the first Republican woman in
Yes.
history to win, to get this far, to win delegates for the
Mhm.
nomination. She's also, by the way, I looked it up, she's also the only Republican in history to be both a governor and have served in the presidential cabinet.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. She has, done what we love, which is broken so many glass ceilings, right? And I kind of felt the same way as you, Lauren, when she left, because to me, she was doing what was so critically important. Frankly, I wish that she had started to do this from the very beginning of her campaign.
Yeah.
Maybe things might have been different, which is that she was really taking it to Donald Trump. She was really laying out the truth about who he was, what he represented, the fact that, and I believe this, even now, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, he cannot win the general election. She demonstrated his vulnerabilities throughout the campaign up until now with the critical, independent, moderate Republican women, all of the groups that he did not get in 2020 that he will need to get now if he wants to win, and that frankly he is even doing a better job of alienating. And so she really demonstrated that she can get 10, 20, 30, even up to 40% of the Republican electorate.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, if he doesn't consolidate that, he's not going to win. And there are many people within those percentages that, anecdotally, they were talking to reporters saying, I could never vote for
Yeah.
Donald Trump. That's why I voted for Nikki Haley. And a lot of those were ones that Biden got in 2020. And I think that they are very gettable for him now.
So as usual, you and I are in like vehement agreement about a lot of things. But what makes me insane right now, and I've been dying to talk to you about this, what makes me absolutely insane is the number of people who are absolutely convinced we're heading for a Trump second term. And this is like smart people who I really respect in Washington and beyond, like people who work in politics and should honestly know better. And they don't seem to take seriously the signs that we all see, which is the loss, how many folks he's lost in the middle, which he frankly never had in the first place,
Right.
hasn't had in years, hasn't had
Right.
since he
So
won.
so
And
didn't really lose. He just
he
never had
never
them.
got him. He
Very good.
never got him, which is why he lost, why he's lost every election since 2016.
Mhm.
But like the fear factor, and I think some of it is some of it is because of these cuckoo polls
Yeah.
that I know you and I just hate, including the Sienna New York Times poll from last week, which like everyone in Washington is like all a tizzy over.
Yeah.
And it's a garbage poll. It was
It is.
actually oversampled Republicans,
Mhm.
oversampled non-college educated, which is like
Mhm.
a larger segment of the conservative voting bloc. So anyway, like, how do we convince people? I mean, maybe scaring them is a good plan because it gets them to actually turn out. But like, I cannot listen to any more
I
people tell me
know.
that I'm out of touch because I don't think Donald Trump is going to win.
I know. So I think what bears repeating is a couple of points that are even much more substantive, much more based in reality of where the electorate is. And I think we have to shame those people who would rather put all of the onus and importance on these polls. And let's remember these polls are a smidgen of the electorate.
900
They
people.
are voters telling anonymous pollsters in an anonymous way how they feel at that one moment in time. Very possible they just came back from the grocery store and are pissed off because, prices were high, and they might have voted for Biden in 2020, but at that moment in time they're mad and they're going to take it out on him, right? And
Yeah.
that's what you see in these polls. And the reason why I think that we should take them, with a grain of salt,
Or
um,
like a whole bag of salt.
it, a whole bag of salt, exactly, is because if truly the enthusiasm for Joe Biden was in the toilet, he would not have been able to raise $132 million in cash
Yeah.
and have so much money in his coffers that it's breaking records for a president, any president in history, going into his reelection campaign. If people were not excited about having him, they wouldn't give of their own hard-earned money. It
So
wouldn't be
Maria, that's such a great point. I
one
don't hear
nugget,
nearly,
one other nugget, which is
yeah.
critical. 97% of those donors, Lauren, are people who are giving him less than $200.
Mhm.
So that is not like billionaires giving him money, right? Like
Yeah,
they criticize Hillary Clinton for doing. These are people, everyday people, hard-earned money that they are investing. They are literally buying what he is selling.
that's amazing. And actually, I'm really glad you said that because I don't feel like we've been hearing enough about that. And I think it's a really, really smart point. I mean, the other point that I keep making also, which, you know, will continue to be a critical factor is who actually turns out to vote, which is overwhelmingly women.
Yes.
And, the IVF decision is certainly not ingratiating some large swath of American women towards
Yeah.
Donald Trump. I mean,
Yeah.
he ushered in all of this, right? The fall of Roe leads to the fall of IVF. And now
Right.
Republicans are like falling all over themselves to try to say they support IVF. And then, Johnson is like, we have to study the issue. It's so new since 1970. I mean, it's like, they're just bumbling around this, and women's lives are in the balance. Like it's just like that's the piece
Yeah.
that pisses me off because I know you feel this way, that like our friends in the political class are constantly discounting women voters.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. It has yet the ugly sheen of sexism and misogyny. Oh, women are over it. They don't care about that anymore. They said that going into the 2022 midterm. And,
I
and look what
do.
happened, right?
Yeah.
They think that our rights don't matter to us anymore. They
Yeah.
think that our freedoms are, something that we got all in a tizzy about right after Roe, but you know what? We're over it. Well,
Right.
F
We're
no,
not
we're,
over it.
we're not over it, because when my daughter is going to grow up in a country with less rights than I had growing up, that's not acceptable. And
Me
guess
either.
what? It's not just us, it's our husbands, our
Yeah.
brothers, our fathers, the men who love us, and Republican women are included in this as well, because everything, when we talk about reproductive rights and freedoms, has to do with families, has to do with communities, has to do with the future of what we want this country to be. That's why this issue is such a big deal, even though it is not captured in polls, and it is continuing to be front and center because of what you just said. When the Alabama Supreme Court says that embryos are persons, that is taking away the rights for
Children.
so many families to be able to have children. And Republicans are panicking over this because they have once again bungled it. They know that Democrats and people like you and I are going to make this front and center. It's not going to go away. And it's going to be something that will continue to be electoral kryptonite for them.
Yep, it's not going away. I've been talking a lot about how much the president needs to continue to prosecute, just hammer that over and over and over again, and we'll
Absolutely.
see. I'm sure, he's starting to. I've thought it was a mistake that he's mostly had Kamala doing it. I think he needs to start talking about it. We
It needs
comfortable
to
with
be
it.
both of them.
It's got to be both of them.
Yeah.
So I know that one of the things that really infuriated you, I know about the particular Times Sienna poll, which we will not talk about because it sucks, was their take on Latinx voters. And this is always like, this is another one of those like endless sort of inside Beltway loops of drama, which
Yeah.
is this constant worry. And all of our research and everything we've looked at is that Latinx women are
Mhm.
solidly continuing to support Democrats. There has definitely been a bit of erosion among Latinx men, but
Mhm.
not anything like the sort of
No.
flag alarms that everyone keeps raising. So what's your take on this? Because I do think, look, everyone needs to do a better job engaging Latinx voters. Our
Mhm.
good friends at Univision have been beating that drum for a long time, but no one's doing a good job with it. But the throwing up the hands also seems like really ridiculous. So what's your take?
Yeah, and this is a really important question because I guarantee you there is zero chance that Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden among Latinos. Just zero, less than zero. And here's the reason why this particular poll was so egregiously wrong. In order to correctly poll the Latino community, you have to have more than 100 people, and I don't even think they had 100 people.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, whatever sample you have to have at least 35%, if not 40% of those interviews done in Spanish. If you don't have that, you are committing Latino polling malpractice. Do you know what percentage of interviews they had in this New York Times Sienna poll? 3. 3%. So this in no way, shape, or form is any kind of real representation of where the Latino community is on issues of politics, and certainly Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. And you're right, there has been smidges of erosion here and there, but the same kind of narrative started to develop in 2022, similar to the choice issue. They were saying Latinos are running into the hands of Republicans, and guess what? In Nevada, Senator Cortez Masto won with a massive advantage among Latinos. The Senate race in Pennsylvania, Fetterman won 71% of the Latino vote.
Yeah.
So across the board, that did not appear. It's not going to appear this time around. We have work to do. We absolutely have work to do to bring together the Democratic coalition. And this is the only place where I think these kinds of polls are helpful, because the Biden campaign should take a look at that and say, look, we know we're not where this poll is, but let's pretend we are. And
Yeah.
that way, we're not going to take anything for granted. We're not going to leave anything on the table. We're going to put everything out there. We're going to fight our booties off, because this is the kind of existential threat that Donald Trump and the Republicans pose to this country.
All right. So I know you don't have a ton of time, but I got to ask you one thing, because I do feel like the other thing I'm really like going through all my grievances with you today. My other recent grievance is that I cannot handle, and this is back, I thought about this while you were talking, because the New York Times is absolutely guilty of perpetrating some of this.
Mhm.
And the New York Times coverage of the president has been so atrocious, like it has turned into like just an absolute hit rag.
Mhm.
But the constant narrative about Biden's mental acuity and his
Oh,
age, I cannot handle how many otherwise intelligent, educated Democrats,
I know.
Democrats, Maria, who the first thing they say to me is, oh, I heard Biden's like totally not with it and he's lost his mind. This is like the most successful disinformation campaign I think I've
Yeah.
ever seen. And
Yeah.
Trump has won this one. Like, yeah, it's really hard to get people back from this, because everywhere you go, like smart people who should know otherwise have bought this nonsense disinformation that somehow the president isn't compass menti, when the other guy, like to the president's point, can't remember his wife's name.
Much more so.
It's
Yep.
not even
Yep.
close.
I
But
know.
how did we lose this? And more importantly, how does he get this back? I mean, I keep seeing texts like the campaign is going to show a very vigorous President Biden. Maybe he's going to start running marathons now, like on camera. Like, but they have lost this one.
He's gonna run up and down the stairs of the
They need
in the
they
well of
need
the Senate.
short speeches. That's how they do this with him. Very short. He's
Yeah.
good for the first like 8 minutes and then he starts to drift. Anyway, how do we win this? Because this is like the biggest, most successful piece of disinformation in this
Yeah.
campaign so far.
I think they need to put him out there more, because I think he does well. I think one of the gifts that he's given, that he's been given because of what you just said, is the gift of low expectations, right? So he goes out there, he knocks us out of the park, and that's how you start really driving at what you just said. When frankly, the other guy is almost the same age, and he is the one who confuses Nancy Pelosi for Nikki Haley. He's the one who thinks he ran against Obama and not Biden and not Hillary. I mean, it is insane how much drither the other guy spews every day. And, it's Joe Biden, the one who's getting hit with the mental acuity question. So I think they just need to go out there,
Yeah.
show him in these conversations. He's so good at one-on-one. He's so good in small groups, but also let Joe Biden be Joe Biden. His gift is that personal connection with people and with voters, his empathy, his decency. And frankly, in speeches like tonight, when the expectations are so low, he'll end up, hitting it out of the park the same way that he did in this speech a year ago. And let's remember, this is where he feels really comfortable. He's a creature of the Senate, he's a creature of the House. So tonight he's going to feel like he's home. And so, yeah, I mean, I hope that
Human mediators. We need the next
he's
8 months of
energetic and
human
he's giving it to them.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Maria. I'm so appreciative that you joined us on Majority Rules.
course.
That's why we call it this.
I love it.
The
I love
title?
it, Lauren. Thank you so much for
Majority
having me. I
Rules.
really appreciate it.
Thanks for being on more soon.
Of course. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us at Majority Rules. We will be back next week with another episode diving deep into the news behind the news, the insight behind the insight, and giving everyone a full picture of how the majority of Americans play, what they do, their impact, their power, and the outcomes for democracy. So tune in again soon.